public wanting to support this war any much longer. I mean, there was already a large amount of people not happy with this being passed here in early 2024.
Yeah, and you had one of the Republican senators that did vote against it that you cited a second ago, J.D. Vance. He specified it. This is not like just because I'm against Ukraine. He said I'm not. He said, but it's a capacity issue. He said, for example, the interceptor missiles, which are absolutely essential to allowing, or that's allowing the Russian side to use air power so effectively and devastatingly against Ukraine, is because there's not enough interceptor missiles on the other side. Well, he said this aid package is going to put in a long-term contracts to expand the capacity, but he said it's going to expand it from 500 missiles a year to 600 missiles a year. So it's still a very small amount. And one of these, it doesn't take more than a few of these attacks by Russia to eat those missiles up. They go like that, and they're so expensive. So it's only going to increase the capacity by this much, and the need is this much. So the numbers and the math, it just doesn't add up.
And I think we just have to go back to that main point that you had brought up, is that it doesn't matter. We can theoretically, we could supply them an endless amount of money and weapons, but if you don't have the manpower, right, there's nothing that we can do. We're not going to put NATO troops on the ground. We're certainly not going to risk American lives and put American troops on the ground. Without that, without more bodies, how can you win this war? Like you said, money and equipment is needed, but nothing more important than actual people. And you're going against Russia, who has millions more. And basically, I think they're at a point where they're probably feeling very confident that they will win this war, and just know that patience is needed right now.
And Cyrus, I saw on it was a Russian Telegram channel yesterday, something that was just really, really hard for me to watch. There was Russia has, of course, they took Avdiivka not long ago. Now they're continuing to move further to the west. One of the areas near there was called a place called Berdichi, and it was basically a forest line that Ukraine had been operating in. And after Russia captured it, one of their soldiers went in there with a camera, and it's a 6-minute video where the guy's just walking down this entire tree line, the forest where the Ukraine side had been holding out. And all you see is this unbelievable littering of Ukrainian soldiers everywhere. And you see that they didn't have a good defensive position, which is alarming, because that tells you that on the front line, they don't have these good defensive positions. And that's why Russia's continuing to move on. The second thing that is a military I saw is that this is the Russian firepower going in. And it wasn't just artillery. It was their big FAB bombs that they now have, these glide bombs, and they call the toss flamethrower systems, which is a thermobaric explosion. And these people were just obliterated, and the trees were just, big, thick trees were looked into matchsticks, just shattered everywhere because of this. Meaning, Russia didn't have to storm the line to take it. There weren't a lot, it wasn't an infantry battle. So all these guys died just sitting in their holes. That's why the casualty count is so high on the Ukraine side, and it's much lower than the West claims on the Russian side, because they don't have to close with them to destroy them.
Right. Yeah, it's a tragedy. I mean, there's so many young men and women that have lost their lives in Ukraine. And I think, Zelensky had lowered the age of commitment as well. I mean, he's trying to get as many more younger Ukrainians in. But again, that it sounds like to me as well, what you're talking about is also a lack of training and probably that military knowledge.
Yeah, they don't have a chance to do that. They just mobilize them. They can't mobilize enough. So they're not, the people that they are forced to mobilizing aren't enough to offset the losses. And that's why this is so egregious to me, because Zelensky is lowering the age to get more men in there. Towards what end? There's no rational path to throw it around. Why do you want to keep throwing your men into a losing battle that it just can't be turned around rationally? I just do not understand it.
I agree with you. Danny, I want to switch a little directions here, because I think one of the factors that led to the passage of this bill was a theory that basically, Russia, and specifically Vladimir Putin, wants to recreate the Soviet Union. He wants to, first he's going to take over Eastern Ukraine, which he's done, those regions. Next, he's going to go Western Ukraine. Then he's going to go into the former Baltic states. Then he's going to go into Eastern Europe, then Western Europe, and he's going to go on this, raging war path. And I think I'm going to say this out loud. I think this is a lie that's been propagandized to the American public, because I don't think that that's Russia's intentions at all. But yet that is probably the theory that needs to be spread. That way we can justify sending another $61 billion. I want to know your thoughts on that theory. Is Putin really wanting to conquer Europe? Is that his end goal here? Or does he simply just is it really just all about Ukraine and the existential threat that NATO membership poses to Russia?
Cyrus, it is a lie. It is a known lie. It's not a theory. It is a fact. And here's why I say that with such confidence and authority. First of all, let's look at the capacity issue. I don't care what anybody says. I care what they can do. What do they have the capacity to do? For example, Hitler in the early part of the World War II, had millions of men under arms. They had an industrial capacity that could crank out all kinds of tanks and airplanes and everything else. And he had the capacity to take the whole continent. So when he was telling Lord Chamberlain in 1938 that he's not going to do anything and you should trust me and sign this piece of paper, the famous, deal where he basically, was appeasement. That's what everybody talks about all the time. Hitler had the capacity to make good on that. He had said that he had a continental wide desire. So he had the desire and he had the capacity. So it was not real smart to sign away and pretend like nothing's going to happen. This is not 1938 anymore. Vladimir Putin, even if you think he's as evil as Adolf Hitler, it does not have his capacity. So first point is, if you look at what Russia has in tanks and artillery pieces and air power, missile capacity, all those things, and how many men they have under arms, what is the total size of their force? Then you look at what it would take to actually make good on all those things that you just said people are warning about, of going into the Baltics and then into anywhere else. It doesn't exist. And the biggest shortfall in that is not even the number of troops. It's their ability to project power. It's their logistics system. It can go maybe 90 miles before it runs out. And they have to have the system that they designed, it runs on railroads. And the rail lines on the Russian side are not the same as in the European side. Ergo, that they can only go about 90 miles past the last train station they have. Right. Once you run out of that, they can't go any further. But even if Putin had those desires, which he doesn't, he can't make good on them. Here's the kicker. People in the West, the leaders, know this. I talked to somebody in Europe last week who has access to know some of the people in some of these other countries. And I point blank asked him, I said, do they actually believe what they're saying in public? Because I see many people in the Baltics make these claims. And he says, no, they all know that. Every one of them know that. But they also they have a fearful public, so they want to say these things to make them support giving more defense for their own buildup. So they want to expand their national security capacity, et cetera. So they know that that's nonsense, but they say it anyway because it works and it does get them the money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the issue that I think we really use. I think the U.S. government uses this theory in a lot of ways, right? It's the same way that we say, hey, China's going to invade Taiwan at any minute, so let's send more money to there. If we don't support Israel and we send them billions more, it's gonna expand into this. And certainly, I like your point on the capacity issue, and I think that's a big one because, like you said, even if Putin did have those ambitions, it would not be feasible. And you compare that to Hitler back in the day, who had those ambitions and it was very feasible. He had the capacity to actually pull it off. And so I think that theory doesn't check out. I think that is completely propaganda.
Well, and we have to add on to that Putin does say the opposite. He has said since 2007 that he wants security on his border. He has never said anything besides he wants a negotiated deal with Ukraine. And he doesn't want to have to militarily defeat them. He said that, even recently in that Tucker Carlson interview, he again said, I'm willing to negotiate, but they have a law preventing negotiations right now. So it's not him. He doesn't want to go further. He just wants to end the war and have security.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. And also just some common sense here, Danny, because obviously if Putin were to invade Western Europe or even the Baltic states, I mean, several of them are members of NATO. So obviously you have the Article 5 that would immediately be implemented. And then now all of a sudden you have Russia versus the United States in a military conflict, both nuclear powers. That's not something that Russia wants either.
And look, you're 100% right. You did absolutely hit it on the head. Putin acknowledges out loud what you just said. He said, we don't have anywhere near the capacity conventionally to go against NATO. So we would never try then. But if NATO tries, then I don't have the capacity either. So it's going to go nuclear. So as long as you want to avoid nuclear war, don't have this war. He knows that. He's not suicidal. He's very rational. However, if you think it's evil or whatever, people can think whatever they want, but he's definitely not stupid or suicidal.
No. And I don't think I think this is just really all about Ukraine. And it's been that way. And he's been preaching that message for many years. And I think a difficult one for Europe is the fact that, they're caught in a very difficult situation because the United States guarantees security for Europe, right? Europe would not be as strong today if it was not for the United States military guaranteeing that security. But at the same standpoint, because the U.S. offers security, you now have to go with the United States policy. And we saw that with, what was it, Merkel? She was very much, Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, and the French president at the time. They both had spoken out and said, look, we don't want Ukraine to go towards NATO membership. But of course, the United States overruled them and said, no, we're going to push forward this. So again, it's the Europeans that suffer, but they can't really say anything to the United States because